I can't recall the year actually, but I was running SVASE, the Silicon Valley Association for Startup Entrepreneurs. And we had a lot of wonderful volunteers. We had over 200 people who volunteered regularly. So it was a large organization, although most of them were volunteering. And we did a lot of events. We had 10 to 12 events every month. And so
Wow.
that's what most of the entrepreneurs, yeah, that's what most of the volunteers worked on. And we had all kinds of tiers, people who did promotion, people who did the operations management, the organized the catering, all these things. But but we always had a program manager in charge of each event. It was really their brainchild. It was something that they were excited about because they're the ones who got the speakers. And so Tim came to me and he had an idea for an event. We had a thing every month called the main event, and where we tried to get real headliner kind of speakers. We usually had anywhere from 150 to 500 attendees at those.
Wow.
And so Tim, you know, in a way that I strongly support, and it was smart of him to do, not surprisingly, is he wanted to meet certain people. And so he thought, I'll organize an event and I'll ask them to come, and that'll be a way to meet them. And it worked. And he got, I remember 3 out of the 4 panels. He put together a panel on consumer products. And one was, specifically it was on consumer product marketing. So one was Steve Smith, who is the founder of Tazo Tea. And before that, several other tea companies, which is an amazing, that was an amazing marketing story, because Tazo, first they got the contract with Starbucks because he was friends with Howard Schultz. Then they invented the tea to go with the contract. So he was a great speaker. Also on the same panel, he had the man who wrote the book, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh, Jack
Another
Canfield.
amazing marketing. Yes, he got him. And a third person on the panel was the guy who invented the Chia Pet. So he was the maven of home shopping. And that was fascinating. And I think there might have been a 4th panelist, but I mean, it was just a powerhouse, amazing group of people that he brought together for that. So it accomplished Tim's goal, and we had an amazing event. So that's how we met. There are a lot of them, and I did take a look back at the table of contents to remind me, because it's been many years. So I was like, well, which things do I do now that relate to the book and which don't? You know, and as I went back to them, I developed actually quite a long list. But I think that before I go into that, I think it might help frame this for me to tell you how I've evolved my life, because then a lot of these things fit into it. So beginning of my career is very, very traditional. After getting out of Harvard Business School, I went to work for a Big 4 accounting firm. I was a management consultant, you know, wearing suits and ties every day, back in the day where women wore ties, and very, very straight-laced, you know, 6.5 day a week, 12-hour day kind of job. And that was the career path, and went on from there to then join a large company as head of strategic planning, and then after a couple of years was promoted to chief financial officer. And again, these, you know, and then I was in CFO jobs for at least 15 or more years, and those jobs are also very much, you know, tied. Sometimes I felt like I was chained to the desk, and you know, you're very, very, very corporate jobs, very structured situations. But after a few years of that, the company was going through a change of command, and the CEO was leaving and asked me and another person to go with him and start a business. So that was first time I was an entrepreneur, and that was a huge breaking point, because even though this was way back when, I guess this was like 96 or something, we went virtual, you know, so it was a very early time. We didn't have all the tools we have now. And so then ever since then, you know, that was my first step into the, you know, the more free world of structuring your own life. So I did a bunch of things. I was on several founding teams, And finally, I ran an investor group. I ran SVASE. I started teaching. And so my life became very fluid, which was very exciting because it's putting all things together, sort of like Tim. And then I started my own company, raising money for hedge funds and venture capital and private equity funds. And at that point became completely unchained to any kind of office situation, because I could do that anywhere. And my staff could be located anywhere. And it was very, very liberating and very cost effective. So I used all kinds of virtual resources during that period. And then that ended about 7-8 years ago. I would say probably 7 years ago, when I decided, okay, that was fine. That was enough of that, though. I've kind of taken that to as far as I can go, because that was in the securities industry, highly regulated industry, and I ended up the cost of regulation was kind of eating up all my profits. And I have one staff person who did nothing but fill out forms for regulators. Got expanded dramatically into a much bigger overhead and much bigger business that could support that kind of regulatory overhead. I felt like I was just working for the regulators. So I said, well, that was enough of that. But meanwhile, I had already developed homes in other places. So I had a home in the Bahamas and a home in Hawaii and a home in California, because I had a very, very fluid lifestyle, which was very attractive. And so that obviously reflects a lot of what Tim talks about. But then it got even more fluid, because I decided, well, what do I want to do next? I decided to go back to school and get a doctorate. And after researching that, I decided to apply for, I was accepted at the University of South Africa, which is known, it's one of the oldest universities in the world, and it's known for distance learning because it serves all of Africa. We don't realize sitting here how big Africa is sometimes, and that it's composed of many, many countries. And so this university serves the continent. And I flew to Johannesburg, and for a week of meeting the professors and the other students. Their library system is amazing. I've been on Stanford Library Online, and it is nowhere near the scope of UNISA's, University of South Africa, just in terms of sheer number of publications, number of journals, number of resources, ease of use, because serving all of Africa, they have had to be online for a long, long time. So that was a wonderful process. And then when I went back to that, then San Jose State said, well, since you're getting back into academics, and I had stopped teaching at San Jose State while I was running the securities business, because that was really engrossing, building one's own company. They said, since you're back in academics, why don't you come teach again? So my schedule for the past 7-ish years has been teaching, got very involved to teach a number of different courses at the university, now wonderfully online since last spring, which right now I'm in Hawaii at my house and teaching students who are everywhere. I'm a student in China, a student in Arizona, a student in Utah, a student in Colorado, plus a whole lot of them in California. I totally love this. I think this is the way to teach. It's fantastic. And this summer I got 2 certificates in online teaching, which I really realized I knew nothing about. And there was a lot to learn to make it effective. So this is my big thing now. I can't even imagine if they ask us to go back into a classroom, what I'm going to do. It'll be sort of like saying, go back into that shoebox, chain yourself to the desk again. No, thank you. And then I do consulting to the securities industry. I don't sell any more securities, but I do consulting, which again, I can do anywhere. I was in the Bahamas all summer, doing it from there. And then also, I'm on the board of directors of a company, and we've had our meetings virtually. But there's one other thing that is important, because it's very much reflective of the spirit of Tim's book, which is a few years ago, I was at a conference. I started chatting with a woman, and she said, oh, my son just started a company, and you should take a look at it. It's called Dog Vacay, and it's like Airbnb except for dogs. So people take care of each other's dogs. And I said, I don't have a dog. I don't need this. She goes, oh, just look at it. Moms, talking to everybody about the kids. So I looked at it and thought, oh my God, my dog died many years ago, and I deliberately didn't get another dog because I wanted this freedom to travel all over the world and wherever at any time. But I thought, this is a way I could have a virtual dog, a virtual pet, dog on demand. And so I signed up with this service, and within one day, I started getting pinged by people saying, please take care of my dog. And so for several years now, there has not been a day anywhere, anytime that I have not had a pet with me when I wanted to. And people pay me for this, which I think is just so bizarre, that I get paid for loving and being loved by an animal at my convenience, when I want to, where I want to. And this has, not only do I do a lot of it when I'm in California, and I have this whole group now of wonderful, loving dogs that I take care of when I feel like it. But also, I've done it now all over the world. I found a different site that does this on an international basis. And so I've been to, I think, 6 or 7 countries now, taking care of dogs, cats, and birds. So basically, and this is, of course, pre-pandemic, but it's starting to open up again. People all over the world need help, if they have animals. And so I just pick places that I want to go. And, Tim has the thing about, you can live really cheaply other places. Well, you can live free in other places by taking care of people's animals. And so I've been to gorgeous homes. I was staying for a month at a home on the southern coast of Greece. It was just this fantastic resort and type place. I have stayed on the ocean in Panama. I stayed there for a month last Christmas. I've stayed for 3 weeks in this mansion in Singapore, a 5-story mansion with pool and elevator, because they didn't want their dog to be alone while they went someplace. It's in Greece, Panama, Singapore, Bahamas. I've done that every summer for the past 5 years on a beach in the Bahamas with 3 dogs that I love. And where else? The US, obviously, but Northern Queensland, Australia. That was amazing, up in the rainforest, taking care of birds. And then I remember, Christmas Day, which of course their summer, going swimming in a wild river in Northern Queensland. And then finally, Vanuatu, which was a totally amazing experience. I spent a month there on 600 acres of jungle by myself with the dog and 2 cats. And that was an amazing experience. So the way my life has evolved, and I think this also reflects Tim's point of view, maybe that's why he and I resonated, is that it's not about the things, it's about the experiences. And this new wonderful development in the economy that I've been able to take advantage of, it lets me experience lives in other places as if I grew up or lived in another place. And I intend to keep doing that for the rest of my life. Why have one life when you can have many?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't stay at my homes anymore. Very rarely. The only reason I'm at my home in Hawaii is because it's we can't rent them out. Until last week, it was locked down, because normally I try to keep my homes rented out. And then, and I go elsewhere to explore new places and get new experiences. But because of the quarantine situation, this wasn't able to be rented again till last week. But I'm going to be leaving here next week, now that, knock on wood, we can rent again. And then I'll move on to the next place. There's a couple of different vectors that are really important. One of them is I actually feel much more connected with my students, just like with you here now, looking people in the eye for a few hours a week. I never look that many people in the eye in a classroom. I'm walking around the classroom, but people are doing this and doing that. Mm-hmm. But this is, we're very close to each other virtually. And I'm getting to know people's voices and their expressions in a way that I never knew before. And I know, of course, it's the same that way. I do require video participation because without that, it's just a non-starter. You know, I'm just lecturing to, I might as well be lecturing to the wall, you know, and I know that the people on the other side, the students, it is just way too easy to tune out if you know that, you know, nobody's watching. So that's one vector, is that actually we physically engage better this way. The other is that what I learned a lot about this summer was ways to program the course material in a much more interactive way. So it used to be the traditional way, the way that it was when I went to school, is at the beginning of the semester, you get a syllabus, you get a list of all the topics and a list of reading to do. And there's some due dates, you might have to hand some papers in, and there's some exam dates, and then, you know, go for it, do it. I've set up now all my courses, because this is the way they structured the training they gave us, where literally the student logs on to the course and it has blah, 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 and then press the next button, and it literally holds their hand through every step. Now do this problem. Now read this article and then come back to this page. Now write what you thought of it. Now this, now that. It's like real-time interactive almost. It's way, way more hands-on than the old-fashioned method. It's taken a lot of work, but of course, first, it's been fun and engaging, but secondly, you only have to do it once, and you could always tweak it or update it. But, you know, it's like building a house and you get to live in it. So I think are extremely important are things like what Tim calls the art of saying no.
Yes.
You know, saying no without guilt is hugely important. And framing the question for an efficient response. You know, that's not only something I'm always trying to do, and train the people around you to respond in the way that you want to them to respond to you, so you can actually get work done. But also I try to teach that to students a lot, sometimes successfully. The stop dealing with time wasters, super important. And the 80-20 thing, which I tend to think of myself as, you know, how is this going to further my goals? Is this trip necessary? Is this thing necessary? One thing that I realized now that I've been spending a lot of time this year, long stretches of time, not in my home, I've stopped renting cars. I used to always, wherever I went, rent a car. I thought that was freedom. Actually, renting a car is not freedom in a lot of places. It's it ties you to useless things that you don't have to do. And so I now pretty much, it would be something really strange to make me rent a car, because I go to a place because I want to be in that place, not to run around wasting my time driving hither and yon. So that's been a really good lesson. I find myself getting much more of the important things done by not having a car. In terms of what he has that that I don't know. I didn't really think of stuff. I didn't think of anything in the book that I would not advise people to do. I think it's pretty practical knowledge. I did think a bit about the question. Well, you know, by the way, I hadn't keyed in the fact that he wrote this 4-hour body book until I went back, you know, to look to refresh myself on the Workweek book, and I hadn't read the 4-hour body, but I bought it, so I'm going to. And so maybe when I read that one, I'll see if there's stuff that I don't agree with. But from what I've read, it sounds really, really good to me. It sounds like something I could really embrace. It's something people approach me about quite often, maybe because they see what I've done. I think that's probably it. And they say, how could I get that kind of freedom? And almost invariably, they are just held back by fear, actually fear of not knowing if they're going to succeed in a new situation. If they drop the trappings of their old situation, maybe they won't have the success skills. But the counter to that is a phrase I really like, that is, if if you want to get something you've never had, you have to do things you've never done. Lots of times when people are gripped in fear, those kinds of things don't resonate to them. They resonate later after they've gotten through it. So I try to give them analogies, like physical analogies. One analogy that really resonates with me is the idea of swimming. Swimming is a terrifying thing. You think of drowning, falling through water, your head will go underwater, you could sink. But once you try it, and people do swim naturally. It's really, you just have to let go of the fear, and then you're floating on top of the water, and it's holding you up, and you're able to move easily, and it's not. It's a supportive feeling. It's not a fearful feeling once you do it. And in fact, swimming is one of my very favorite things. Wherever I go in the world, I try to be in a place where I can swim, because there is that wonderful free feeling when you're swimming. There's no gravity. And so I try to get them to think about that, particularly if they like swimming, to give them that analogy that, it's scary before you do, but then you'll find that you'll be supported and you have the power to move forward. And another analogy I give people is, imagine you're at the top, if they're skiers, at the top of a slope, and it's always very scary when you're at the top of a hill when you get off the chairlift, but there's only one way down. You're skiing, and gosh, it's working, and you're propelled by the momentum of nature. And so because it's really about the fear. So that's how I try to think of ways to counsel them to get through that initial fear and have the confidence. That's why I think it's the same when people stay in bad marriages where they're very unhappy. It's not that they want to stay in that marriage. It's that they are scared of not being successful if they leave, even though where they are is certainly not successful. So, so it's really about facing that fear. That's really, really clear to me. And I try to give this advice to people who have, especially young people, where I see that they do have a lot of potential that they are not necessarily cognizant of or recognizing. And so the advice that I have loved to give to myself, or had someone else give to me when I was 20, is that you're really only limited by your self-perceptions. So having a self-perception of, I have to work really hard to succeed. Well, it made me work really hard, but I think it would have been enhanced by also the self-perception of a lot more positives. Like, for example, and this is tailored to me, but I wish I had done positive, like practice daily affirmation statements to myself, like, people like you. Just that, people like you. Because I knew I could work very hard, and that created success. But whenever I walked into a new situation, I was always tentative, nervous, striving to get people to like me. And I think that really is dysfunctional. I think that you should walk into every situation telling yourself, people like me. And then you still have the same odds of them liking you or not. You just feel a lot better about it. People like you, affirmations like, people like you, people respect you, people trust you, you're very powerful, people are glad to see you, you take good care of yourself. Those kinds of positive affirmations would have been great to start way early on, even as a teenager, and it would just have relaxed me in more situations that I was unnecessarily stressed by, and I think I would have been more successful. I think I learned it by just observing people over the years, where I'd say, hey, they're not working as hard as I am. They haven't got as good into education as I have. They're not as smart as I am, but they walk into the room and assume everyone is going to like them and respect them and interact with them, and they're smiling and they're happy, and people are positively responding to this, but I'm the one who works so hard. So I should have just had that attitude, on top of the education and the hard work and everything. So that's what I try to tell people. Like, I had one intern who, she was brilliant, a woman, beautiful, brilliant, highly educated. She was at Harvard Business School, and she was telling me she was very excited because Warren Buffett was coming to speak. And I said, so what are you going to say to him when you meet him? She's like, I don't think I'll be able to meet him. And I was like, no, time out. No, that's a bad self-talk. The good self-talk is Warren Buffett's coming and I'm going to meet him. Now, how am I going to do that? How am I going to say it? He's going to be happy to see me. She had a lot of this negative self-talk about, oh, I'm not important enough to talk to Warren Buffett. No, you are. Just like Tim is important enough to talk to all those guys back when he was, I think he's possibly still in school. Just think, they're humans. Think of something interesting to talk about and take advantage of that opportunity. And don't, it's so much negative self-talk, people saying, oh, I'm not big enough, not good enough, not strong enough, not important enough. No. If you think of the opposite, then you'll actually succeed a lot faster. You pick up stuff from so many different sources. And I'm very, 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 very eclectic in my reading. I'll hear one thing and I'll look it up and read that. And so it's mostly the past few years, I've been focusing on going deep in regarding the different parts of the world that I'm planning to visit or I'm visiting.
Okay.
And so trying to read a lot of literature about those areas. Before I went to Singapore last summer, I read 7 or 8 books on Singapore, everything from Lee Kuan Yew's gigantic 2-volume The Story of Singapore, which is just amazing, all the way to, I read Singaporean cartoons. So, and I read fiction about Singapore, not just the obvious Crazy Rich Asians, but there's all kinds of different perspectives. So, so that's what I've mostly focused on. And because I think you can learn so much by learning about a different culture, because everyone is a human, but our lives are very different. And a lot of it has different ways of looking at the world and different assumptions and different ways of reacting. So that's what interests me so much about all this travel. So, but then I'll pick up this and that, like I'm going to get the 4-Hour Body book by Tim. I love, one of the things I love to do when I go visit people is look in their bookcase and see what kind of books there are and ask them about them. And so I end up learning about all kinds of new things. I was visiting my daughter last year and she had a book by the famous magician, Penn, blanking on his first name, of Penn and Teller. And I thought, oh, it's a magic book. And my daughter and I both love magic. So I picked it up. It turns out it's a diet book. And it talked about how he lost 200 pounds and changed his thinking about life, about health, about interacting with people, about magic. Wonderful book. And it's hysterical too, because he's a great comedian as well. But that changed my life. That day, I spent the entire day reading the book and I started changing my behavior that evening. It just makes everything so much more relevant. I would walk around the city and I knew the history of places. I knew what I was looking at. I knew what used to be there before that building was there. I would look at a menu and I knew the cultural traditions that the food came from. And I'd read, I'd read books that were written in the sort of patois Singapore kind of Singlish, as they call it, and then could understand, when I was talking to people, what their intonations meant. So I ended up, when the people came back that I was house sitting for, and they said, so what have you done since we've been gone? I started talking about things and they were saying, we've never done those things. You went where? Yeah. The tale as old as time. Entrepreneurs always need money. So it's always about how you're going to get money. And they need to know if there is a common fault among entrepreneurs that's prevalent, it's really loving their product above all else. And so they have no idea how to talk to investors, but they also have no idea how to talk to consumers and to market it. And so like Tim's event was very focused on marketing. So I'd say the two main themes were fundraising and
Mhm.
marketing and, you know, distribution channels. And
Mhm.
I remember still today, the Chia Pet guy walking through, you know, your product, it better not cost you more than 10 cents if you want to sell it for $1. And that was eye-opening for
Mhm.
people in the room. You know, had never really realized the actual chain of margins that one has to work through to actually get a product into a consumer's hands.
Mhm.
And now I teach 2 courses at San Jose State. I teach entrepreneurial finance to undergraduates, and I teach new venture finance to MBAs. And they're similar courses, just at more advanced critical thinking level for the MBA students. And that's what we talk about a lot. We talk about fundraising, all different
Mhm.
sources of where you can get money. And we talk about the needing to understand the consumer pull side of the equation. You can't push products on people. You need to understand how your customers are thinking, because they're the ones that are going to pull your business forward by buying your products.
Mhm.
And one book that I use in those courses is called The Launchpad, which is about the early days of Y Combinator
Mhm.
and the most successful incubator in the world. And one of the comments, one of the mantras that they have there is make something people want. And that sounds so ridiculously elementary, but it's really, really meaningful. And it's shocking the number of entrepreneurs who haven't really thought about that. You know, now that things have gone virtual, there's so many incredible resources available that you used to have to travel to and pay money for. So, for instance, Mark Cuban, who I adore, I think he's awesome, is going to be speaking in half an hour. And I've told all my students they have to watch him and write a report about him. And I'm going to be signing into that, because he's an amazing entrepreneur and angel investor, and very true to his beliefs about that. So separately, I was going to mention, because it reminded me of Tim, I went to an event 3-4 years ago where Susan, and I can never pronounce her last name, Wojcicki, she's the head of YouTube.
Yeah.
She was one of the founding team, or very early employee number 6 or something at Google, and now runs YouTube. And she has like 4 children or something. She has a lot of kids, and she has an amazingly complex and demanding job, because YouTube is a constantly morphing thing. It's not like running a tire business or something where you know exactly what you have to do every day. YouTube is constantly reinventing and rediscovering itself about what it's going to be, how it's going to make money, what they're going to publish, how are they going to, everything. So she does this. And so I went to hear her speak, because I was fascinated about what is it like to run that kind of enormous, but yet completely fluid kind of business, where every day you're defining yourself. And she made a lot of good comments, but didn't really get to the heart of what I was asking. And so I stayed. I was the last person in the room, because I was determined to walk to the car with her. I wanted my one-on-one time with her, and I did. She kind of thought I was stalking her a little bit, but it was friendly and positive, so she got over that. And she, I said, how do you do this? She has a job that you could spend 72 hours a day doing and not be finished with what you could do in a day. And you have, a whole family and children to support, to take care of and interact with, and all these, stay healthy and all these other things. And her comment to me, she said, well, every day, everything she does, she asks herself, how can I do this more efficiently? Or how can I do this most efficiently? Be that handing it to somebody else, or not doing it, or automating it. And she said that's how she looks at it. Oh, and by the way, I should also say, she's an incredibly calm person. She's not hyper. She's not, I went to hear Tom Siebel speak, the founder of Siebel Systems, and he's like on fire all the time. You could see that he's waving his hands and he's screaming and he's stuff. But Susan is really calm. I was like, how are you calm in the sea of total turmoil? And she said, just everything in her life, she says, how can I do this most efficiently? And that's So very much like the 80-20 rule. The time I got in my car, I was doing that analysis on my life, looking at everything. How can I do this most efficiently? Sometimes means not doing it. And just a little side note, once or twice a year, a student comes to me and goes, Professor, I picked up this book somebody recommended, Tim Ferriss, and your name is on the cover. Yeah. Yeah, I knew him when.